Well, if she clicks the link, how would you choose a different browser?
It's not a browser.
You can copy the link and paste it in another browser.
Okay.
Found that Edge works better than Chrome on Microsoft
Edge. Okay.
for me. Of course, if I'm zooming, then it's just the opposite.
Hey, Lance, can we put up something that just says we're going to be a few minutes late for technical difficulties?
You're muted.
Lance, you're muted.
Actually, yes, I have something I can put up, so that's fine.
Of course you do.
Thank you.
She thinks she's in the waiting room now. She rebooted her iPad.
Okay. I'm not seeing her yet.
Okay, we should be live at this point. So good evening and welcome to the fourth virtual comp plan workshop. This is, we have had a number of these sessions and today is Monday, June 1st. And we will be talking about the implementation chapter. Brandon Mark is with us and he is leading the process for the city in his role, and he's the Division Manager of Community Planning and Urban Design. Brandon will introduce any others that are with him and any subject matter experts. And the process is this, that the staff will first present the chapter overview, and there will be questions and comments from the Planning Commission at that time. Since there aren't any individual policies for this, after that process, we'll actually be going into public comment. So the number for public comment is 929-229-5669. There is a passcode. That passcode, and this is up on the screen, is 124-058-305#. As you call in, I will be able to see the last 4 digits of your phone number, and anybody that has called in for public comment, you will be identified by those last 4 digits. When you come on, you should cite your name, your address, and then you will be sworn in. So at this time, I will take a roll call of the commissioners, and then I will turn it over to Brandon. He'll introduce the staff and they will do the swearing in of the group, and then we'll take it from there. So first, the roll call. Commissioner Burns.
Commissioner Burns is present.
Commissioner Strawson.
Commissioner Strawson is present.
Alderman Russell.
Alderman Russell present.
And Commissioner Nicholas is here also. So we will turn this now over to Brandon Mark.
Thank you. Thank you all for volunteering and joining us in these circumstances. Thank you for everyone who's watching maybe on YouTube Live. This evening is our 7th Planning Commission workshop to discuss the 2020 Comprehensive Plan update. Tonight we are discussing the last chapter of the plan, which is the implementation chapter. We have 2 more public workshops scheduled. Next Tuesday, June 9th at 6 p.m. we'll be discussing the roadway classification map. And then lastly, on Monday, June 22nd at 6 p.m., we'll be discussing the proposed land use map and the land use reclassification requests. With me this evening currently is Arash Garamani, our urban designer, and Joe Atkins may join us at some point, who's our deputy director for planning.
Okay, then. If Arash and Brandon would raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the responses given and statements made in this hearing before the Planning Commission will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, first state your name and then say, I do.
Brandon Mark, I do.
We saw Arash move his lips, but we didn't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. Arash Gamani, I do.
Thank you. Okay, the floor is yours, Brandon.
Okay, thank you. So I've prepared a little bit of background summary. So throughout the Planning Commission workshops, we discussed the chapters such as land use, transportation, municipal growth, environmental, and several others. And through that, in each chapter, we discussed the implementation policies. All those policies come together in this chapter, and what we hope is a concise format that gives us a predictable framework to how we implement this plan that so many of us spent so much time on. To be less redundant, we reduced the main chapters to have only the policy statements, and then the implementation measures are broadened in this chapter. For the most part, we've discussed the implementation measures at great length during each workshop, so the point or the purpose of me providing the summary is just to make sure that it's readable and predictable as we move forward to adoption. Some of the revisions that have been proposed throughout these workshops may not have been revised yet. Some have. I'm a little behind on revising some chapters, so I hope within a month or two to have the entire document with all revisions in this chapter. So really the biggest change between this update and the 2010 plan was a measure to be more accountable in implementing this plan. So oftentimes you hear comprehensive plans, you spend so much time drafting them and envisioning them in our future, but then you hear all the time that they sit on a shelf and collect dust and they're never implemented. Well, to combat this, in this plan, we proposed a benchmarking or a monitoring process where every year when we present the Planning Commission with our annual report and the Mayor and Board with our annual report that's required by Maryland Department of Planning, that we outline our implementation chapter in that annual report and where we stand with all of these policies. So when you read through the chapter, and here, let me share my screen, sorry. Bear with me here. So when you read through the chapter, there's several components to each policy. This is a different version that when we sent you Friday, we made a few updates today, and we can send that and post it online as well. But the main change is the monitoring section. There's a piece that shows where each policy stands. So has it started? Is it underway? And has it been completed and adopted or not adopted, frankly? Each policy and implementation measure has time frames. The immediate time frame would be something that is regulatory that staff can handle administratively, such as zoning map amendments, text amendments, different policies or city code policies that we could change to implement this vision. Short-term policies would be 2 to 5 years. They would require partnering with other jurisdictions, the county, the state, federal departments, Downtown Frederick partnerships, other stakeholders, East Frederick and Golden Mile Alliance, to maybe partnership on funds or organization and in order to implement it. This would take a little bit longer. Another short-term policy may require the adoption of one of the immediate policies, such as form-based code, and then implementing different text amendments after the form-based code, or the National Register update, which would maybe then lead into conservation districts or expanding the HPO if warranted. A moderate goal is the third one, which is 5 to 10 years. Similar to the short term where there may be requirements to partner with other jurisdictions or other stakeholders, this would require a little bit more funding that we'd have to forecast in the future and maybe partner with funds or obtain grants. Long term is very similar, where it's something that maybe is expensive, that a lot of money needs to be either expended in phases or accrued, and then maybe it's phased with different steps leading up to that long-term vision. The ongoing goals of this plan, and when reading through this, we have a lot, which hopefully I'll get to. These are goals that the city visions in the next 10 to 20 years, but right now they aren't worded in an actionable statement, or they're worded so that we can refer to them as we go through development review proposals, or we need to make policy updates that we refer back to this and say, this is our vision. This is where we see we're going. It might not be an actionable statement. It might be, but I do plan on going through and cleaning these up after this meeting and before I present the final draft to you, to see if there are any more actionable items where I can tie to a time frame. Next in this section, you'll see project leads. This is the department that would take lead of implementing this policy. So you'll see the planning department, Department of Public Works, engineering, economic development, state of Maryland, the mayor and board a few times. But generally a project lead is going to be some city department that champions the policy, and then it'll be reviewed by the planning commission and mayor and board. One policy that you see maybe the mayor and board is in charge of, maybe like micromobility studies or implementing different micromobility modes, where they have been discussing it in the future, and it's an ongoing discussion until the time where we decide it isn't for us or it is. Next, we tie each policy to the themes of this plan. So if this so right here, land use policy 2, you see promote the downtown by increasing the number of residents and supporting new and existing businesses. The theme of this is vibrant neighborhoods and sustainable city. We have 4 themes in the chapter, which are vibrant neighborhoods, connected communities, sustainable city, and predictable future. This was all in the introduction chapter way back in our first meeting in January. Next, we tie each policy to the Community 2030 goals, which is the mayor's strategic plan. And he has the plan has 6 visions or 6 strategic goals: sustainable urban planning, social well-being, safe and vibrant community, competitive employment, enhanced mobility, and civic engagement. So that's how the framework of the chapter is. Again, a major change from this is just really holding the city accountable for implementing the policies that are in this plan. I just have a list of it's medium list of implementation measures that you may see staff starting to work on immediately. This is a quick list. It's not all inclusive of all the policies that are in the immediate time frame. But some things you might see us working on in the next 2 years, if this is adopted, are an RFP process to secure a consultant to assist with form-based zoning in the East Frederick and Golden Mile areas. Obviously, this depends on funding. You could see a text amendment and zoning map amendment to increase maximum density requirement and proximity to transit HUDs. This is the density enhancement area that we talked about. You could see a text amendment to increase densities of the residential districts, which we discussed in land use. A text amendment to explore increased density through accessory dwelling units. Subsequent to this, you could see studies to eliminate impact fees for accessory dwelling units under a certain square footage. You could see updating the Carroll Creek Overlay District to reduce regulatory measures and streamline the process. We could start new small area plans, recommendation on mobility fees, more organized freight in the downtown areas, and the circulator study. You could see additional outreach efforts in the regarding historic preservation, and like I mentioned, updating the National Register of Historic Places and then conservation districts. Something that's in the housing chapter is a new consolidated housing department, which we've all been following. Also, use of CDBG and other dollars towards affordable housing efforts, such as affordable housing acquisition program, which we've actually already started and successfully purchased a house for affordable housing. In the economic development chapter, there's an immediate policy of a new innovation district to encourage the development of the tech industries in certain areas of the city. In the Parks and Rec, there's a recommendation of a Parks and Rec master plan. And lastly, the financial chapter has a goal to earmark certain amount of monies towards capital improvements. Again, this isn't inclusive of all the immediate policies that you could see staff working on upon adoption, but it's a general overview. And that's pretty much my summary of this section. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So Brandon, I'm going to ask a quick overview question, and then we're going to turn it over to the commissioners and go through the roll call as we do for their questions and comments. That last view, and I thought that was really excellent that you were giving an overview of the kinds of things you could see staff do, such as the RFP, the text amendments, et cetera. Are those things specifically those actions, are those listed in the comprehensive plan, or are those the actions that would happen from the implementation items in the comprehensive plan?
They are implementation measures under certain policies in those chapters. So that list is derived from all the policies and implementations that we discussed.
So it specifically says text amendment for RFP for.
It does not say text amendment. It does not say RFP. I'm just putting it into
the action. It would.
the
Okay.
action.
That's what I thought. I was just trying to. Okay. So with that one question for me, let's turn it over first to Commissioner Burns.
Are we just going over general questions or digging into the?
Well, questions and comments for, actually, this is the entire section because we've already talked about the policies and the implementation items. So it would be the whole overview plus what Brandon presented tonight, sort of how the chapter is, the framework of the chapter.
Okay, I have no comments whatsoever about that. I do have about 10 or 12 comments on the things that allegedly we already talked about. So as far as the overview is concerned and what Brandon's presented, I think it's well organized. I like the timeframes. I think going to 4 different timeframe sections instead of 3 is pretty prescriptive and very detailed. And but nonetheless, I think it's commendable that you're breaking it down into 4 different categories. Short term, mid, and long term, and immediate, as well as ongoing. No, I've got no comments or no questions.
Okay, well, then we will be sure after we have this discussion to go back and address the policies and the implementation items. So I did not bring that up in what our process tonight was going to be. So we will do that. Commissioner Strawson.
Yeah, thank you. This is Commissioner Strawson. First of all, I want to say I like the addition of the monitoring. I think that's going to make it useful. One kind of global comment I had is just go double check all of the acronyms for the various leaders of each implementation item, because there were some that you had the acronyms in the policies that were not in your acronym list, and so I was not sure what they were. And then in the version that you shared on the screen, it looks like you had added a page about how to read this chapter. And I was wondering if you could just focus on that for a little bit and show what that looks like, because that was one of my biggest comments is, how do I read this? This is a little confusing. So if you could just show us how what you added to that, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am. So we added 2 things since we sent this on Friday. We added this tracking key and then the how to read this. So you have your policy, the text for the policy, and then all implementation measures.
Mm-hmm.
This is the strategic goal or strategic plan goal. These are the logos for the plan themes, which are over here. Then next to the numbers to the left is the project lead. These are the time frames. And then this is an idea of what it would look like once the project started commencing.
Good. I think that will be helpful to have that. Then the only other question I had for sort of like global organization is, under each policy, are the implementation measures organized by time period? Because it didn't seem like that was necessarily true. or by order of importance, or seems like there should be some sort of overarching, this is how, are these the most important ones, or these the fastest ones, or some other organization that I didn't pick up on?
Sure. We discussed that. It's a great idea. It's something that would make it easier to determine the priority or the timing of each policy. We're trying to keep the redundancy down in the plan, but we could always reorganize this to include another way to read it, which would have just the timing. So you'd see your first phase, your second phase, your third phase, your fourth phase of implementation.
Right. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that you need to do a lot of reorganizing or adding a third presentation. Just tell people, are they just sort of put in there in the order that you thought them up, or is there some overriding organization that I should be keeping in mind as I'm looking at those implementation approaches?
It's the exact order that we presented it as we drafted each chapter.
Right. But now that we're getting to the end, is there some, and I'm sorry, there might be, I don't know, there might be some better order that makes it all make a little bit more sense.
Generally, the order, so some policies were carried over from the 2010 plan, but generally the order follows the dialogue that's drafted in the chapter, generally.
Okay.
Very roughly.
Okay.
There really isn't an order. So a few of the policies that are big ones, such as form-based code or the National Register, are one of the first policies that you read in the chapter.
Okay.
So you can see land use here, encourage development and redevelopment to be compatible with the character of existing plan development. These are pretty much everything that would be involved in form-based code.
Right. Okay, just think about it. Maybe at some point before it's finalized, pick this chapter up again and look at it. And
yeah.
They may have made perfect sense at the back of each chapter to talk about the implementation in the order that it was discussed in the chapter. But my feeling is that this chapter is going to be pulled out and used on its own. And so.
Understand.
And there may not be, but just to me, picking it up after a couple of days and looking at it is like, well, okay, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. Thank you.
I do. For an example, the Community 2030 strategic plan lays out the implementation in several different ways. They have it through each of the goals, like similar to like what we have. Then they have the priorities, and so it's something that we could do here.
Just see if it makes sense. If it doesn't at the end, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is Alderman Russell.
Alderman Russell here. Thanks for those sort of global questions. The question about is there an order in which these implementations are listed, I thought was a good one. And I understand, I think I understand, Brandon, what you're saying is they're distillations of what we talk about in the chapter, and they're just kind of in that order. But it never hurts to take a second look. I did want to just in your text in the overview want to change one word. In the very first sentence, it talks about there is a mechanism in place to encourage their implementation. I would say facilitate, because we're going to make these things happen. We're not just going to want to make them happen. And then in the second paragraph, I just wanted to discuss a little bit the sentence that says it should be permissive whenever possible, and instead of limiting development of non-conforming operations as current zoning may do, rather allow non-conforming operations to transition into business not currently in place. What do we mean by that?
Good question. Let me reread it. This is talking about, you know, small area planning process and the form-based code, and allowing these non-conforming businesses to operate business as usual, and encourage their expansion into a conforming business in the long run.
So if I was just a resident and I knew nothing about these processes and I read that, that would scare the heck out of me. Because that it sort of implies that, yeah, we're just going to say yeah, and if it's non-conforming, we're not going to really pay attention to it. And I know that's not. I know that it's a much more measured approach than that. So I would just say, let's look at how we express what it is that we're trying to do, and maybe be a little more mindful of how people will interpret that, and make sure that it's clear.
Completely understand.
Thank you. And then let's see, just a couple of technical things in your acronyms there. And I think documents should be consistent, so that when you look at something in the charter or in the strategic plan, it's all meshed together. And for the FIN, the Office of Finance and Administration, we have an Office of Finance, and we have an executive assistant of administration in the mayor's office. So is that two different?
No,
Or is it, we're just talking about the Office of Finance?
it's finance, yes.
Because we have a chief administrative officer. I'm sorry, we have the director of finance, or
Sure.
Department of Finance, rather. Okay. And then the only other comment I'll make is, well, first of all, too, this is beautiful. I mean, this is, Arash, beautifully laid out. It's the kind of document I have been waiting for the city to produce. It is so sleek and modern and clear. It's beautiful. So I just wanted to say that. That said, I have a little concern about the use of some of the colors, particularly the comprehensive plan themes. We've pretty much got primary colors in green, and I just want to make sure that whatever document we produce is visually accessible to anybody who may have color blindness or may have visual impairments. So I just want us to be mindful of that. We talked about the different colors for signs with our new sign program. We talked about, visibility and being able to see. So just that thought. Outside of that, gorgeous.
Thank you. I agree. Rosh has done an amazing job.
And he's hiding there in the background.
He is.
Thank you. Glad to hear that. It's a teamwork.
Okay, Commissioner Nicholas. I know I've said this in the past, but the part about going last is a lot of your questions and comments get said. So thank you, Kelly, for taking some of mine. In the first, so I've got a few miscellaneous things here and there. The first paragraph, I think it's the third sentence. It says that the regulatory controls, blah, 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 are usually the most visible. Is it visible or viable? Did you mean visible? That they're most likely to be seen?
I meant most visible as in like you see it being implemented. There's other things in here where you may not be able to check it off a list.
Okay. All right. There might be a better way of saying that, but okay. That's what you meant by that. All right.
I will reword that.
The first sentence in the second paragraph, it is a regulatory rather than a physical improvement. Could you explain that? the overall recommendation of this plan is a regulatory, it sounds like it's a regulatory improvement, the overarching recommendation. So could you expand on that?
So many of these policies are the sequence is a regulatory change, and then you see the improvements of our built environment.
Okay. So it will first take an improvement in the regulations, then will lead to the physical improvement.
Hopefully, yes. That's the goal.
I think that's I think that sentence could be a little more clear.
Okay.
There's a few things here and there, like instead of waiting certain adequate public, I'm sure you meant waiving, and a few other things. The paragraph before monitoring, it was really, really kind of hard to muscle through that paragraph. And when I got to the end, I thought, you're really saying 4 things: that the recommendations and implementation strategies identified in the previous chapters provide the basis, that follows, provide the plan framework that follows provides. I see a colon and then 4 bullets. I think you're saying 4. I got 4 things from here. And if you could bullet that, that would be a much easier paragraph to understand and read.
Okay. Understand.
That was, oh, no. The rest of my edits are more like edits, which I will put on the Google Doc.
Okay.
So it sounds like now, unless, Brandon, do you have anything you want to tee up as far as the policies and the implementation items, or should we go into the questions and comments?
No, feel free. Any additional discussion we can have on the implementation is worth it. Just note that I haven't had a chance to get deep into the revisions on what we've discussed previously.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Well, with that, let's turn that over to Commissioner Burns, because that's where he's put his focus.
Well, yeah, and maybe part of the focus is the fact that I was going over things that I thought we had talked about and didn't get implemented. So if the policies and implementation part was just pretty much the boilerplate from what was a previous, then maybe it's premature to go into this discussion right now. And I can continue to monitor this as we go along, as opposed to taking everyone's time on something that may already be happening. So I don't know if any of the other commissioners want to go into any of the policies. And if you haven't, I'm not going to bother, because I don't want to do a monologue for half an hour. So maybe what I could do is put an email together with some bullets. Is that acceptable? Since that would be similar to project docs. And the result, if accomplished, would be part of the record when and if just like a citizen making comment. I'm good with that.
That works for me. I hope to, once we get through the roadway classification map, land use map, take everything. I've started working on revisions, but I can't confidently say that, oh, I might have lost you guys.
Great. That sounds good to me.
We can hear you.
I'm good. I'm done.
Sorry,
Okay.
I think I lost you guys.
Well, we can hear you, Brandon.
Yeah, we can.
He looks frozen.
I'm having technical difficulties here. I'm here now, I think.
Looks like you had a haircut.
I did. We won't get into what my barber tried to get me to change my hairstyle into.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll turn it over to Commissioner Strassen.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Strauss, and I do not have any comments on the specific policies or implementation steps. So I'm happy to wait until we see the revised version from Brandon. I like the idea of the email though from Commissioner Burns.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, and before we turn it over to Alderman Russell, just want to announce one more time that the public comment call-in number is 929-229-5669, and the passcode is 124-058-305 pound. And if you do want to make public comment, I suggest you make sure you call in right now. All right, so Alderman Russell.
Alderman Russell here. I don't have anything further, understanding that the edits that we've discussed have not caught up, or this document is not caught up to the edits. So we'll just wait to look and see when the draft is complete, and then we can make sure that everything that we talked about was dealt with adequately. Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Nicholas, I don't have any further comments either. We will wait 15, 20 more seconds just to see if anybody's phone number pops up. Right now I'm looking at everybody who's on the call, and there is no one who has called in. So we're not seeing any public comments as of yet. In the meantime, in case anybody was not on in the beginning, to hear Brandon say that we have 2 more of these set up. Our next one is Tuesday, June 9th at 6 o'clock, and that will be to talk about the roadway classification map. And our final workshop will be Monday, June 22nd at 6 o'clock, and that will be the land use map. And seeing that there are still no more people who've called in for public comment, that is the end of our work session. And so this was a short one. Well done. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Aye.